Welcome to This Story Needs to Be Heard with Lance Gunkel and Adam Steen. This Story Needs to Be Heard is a collection of stories from unsung heroes who are living a life of impact in Iowa and across the nation. This series is brought to you by Syverson Strege, a financial planning firm that exists to help enrich and empower your life and the community. Syverson Strege's focus is to assist clients to be good stewards of their resources to pursue their passions. Join us as we capture stories that need to be heard.
Hello, thank you for joining us today for the This Story Needs to Be Heard interview series. My name is Lance Gunkel. I'm the Managing Director at Syverson Strege. Joining me is my colleague Adam Steen. He is our Director of Business Development. Today, we are very excited to have Carly Ross joining us. Carly has founded 3 successful restaurants. She's worked in the resettlement of refugees and immigrants. She was also the executive director at the JDRF Greater Iowa chapter. And today, Carly is a certified health coach with a degree from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. There, Carly focuses on whole body health, not just physical health. Carly, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lance and Adam. Great to be here.
Well, I think it's never a bad thing to start with food. So maybe we'll start with your culinary career. And so you were in the restaurant industry, and you started Proof, Flour, and the Prairie Canary. And the restaurant industry is notoriously difficult, but yet you found a lot of success there. How did you first get interested in cooking and then end up turning that into restaurants?
Well, I've always had a passion for food and been just someone who loved to spend time in the kitchen. My mom instilled that in me. We were always doing a lot of cooking and having gardens growing up. She always raised chickens. We had fresh eggs. We had goats and a llama named Eddie. So it was a really, fun way to grow up. And I just always appreciated the way that food brought our family together. And then we did a lot of traveling when I was young as well. And I lived overseas when I was in my teens. And so I think I just always sort of noticed the way that, people use food to celebrate and to enjoy their lives, and how it could be just such a wonderful way for us to stop and enjoy just those daily moments. So then as far as how I got into sort of the restaurant industry, it was actually kind of my fallback. I had gone to graduate school. I had started working in the nonprofit sector and, was working in a restaurant as a part-time job. And I ended up just loving it. I just loved, meeting the customers. I loved sort of the management side, keeping track of, inventory, scheduling staff. I kind of have like a very organized, like a brain that likes to kind of keep things organized, so I would always just enjoy it. And I had the opportunity to become a manager, and then this opportunity to open Proof kind of came up. It was just kind of like the stars aligned, and I was the right age, and it was the right time in sort of the development of our city, and it was a wonderful time.
Carly, that's very cool how you used your passions and things and discovered that and turned that into a career. And I sort of view a restaurateur as like the epitome or the definition of an entrepreneur. Because if you're going to run a successful restaurant, there's a lot of things that you have to know, not just financial stuff, but personal stuff and how to deal with employees and customers. So it kind of epitomizes entrepreneur to me. But you went from a restaurateur and an entrepreneur and moved into the nonprofit world with the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. So to me, that's a very interesting shift to do that. What moved you? What was it that moved you to make that change?
Well, there were a few different things. I mean, sort of just from a logistical perspective, I had been running a restaurant in Grinnell, which was about an hour from Des Moines. and a very cool little town, and loved it. But I had just had my first daughter, and so that kind of back and forth commuting between Des Moines and Grinnell just didn't make a lot of sense at the time. And also there's just the fact that when you're running a restaurant, you're doing a lot of evening and weekend hours, and also putting in that much time wasn't easy with a little baby around. So I decided that maybe that lifestyle, that was so fun in my 20s, maybe wasn't going to set me up so well as I moved into my 30s. So I happen to have a little bit of an specialty of expertise in the area of refugee resettlement, because I had worked overseas in refugee camps and had worked at nonprofits here in Des Moines in that field. So I was very fortunate to find the job as the director of the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants here in Des Moines, and I really loved that experience.
Awesome. Well, again, it's interesting to me because it seems that refugees are a passion of yours, and it's something that you recognized and that you wanted to pursue. It's something sort of maybe born or grown in you that caused you to do that and pursue that. And now it seems that you're pursuing a passion that's born inside you to work with individuals with health and nutrition. And I know you're passionate to serve in this area just based on other things I know about you. Can you tell us more about the work that you're doing in the health field with individuals, and what about that truly excites you?
Well, I think my interest in becoming a nutritional health coach was born out of my interest in food and cooking. As I raised my family and just cooked day to day for us, I just started to really become more cognizant of how food was having an impact on our health. And I have my second daughter was born with some health issues, and so I was even more aware of wanting to support her health, and the health of her immune system through our eating styles. So, I just really got very interested in it. And I think, again, going back to my roots of come from kind of that more, not a farm background, but just someone who was raised a little bit on the land, I just realized how important it is to, eat fresh foods, to eat, foods that are preferably grown locally, organic if you can, and I saw how that affected our own, physical and mental and emotional health and all of it. And so that's why I decided to become a certified health coach, more just out of sort of a curiosity and an interest. And then I did have the lucky chance of being able to actually put this into practice as a career now. So that's been wonderful.
That's cool.
Well, and maybe you've touched on this some already, but so many of us equate healthy eating with diet, mm-hmm. which when you hear that word, it's like it is a 4-letter word. And the instant reaction is maybe negative. So I'm wondering how you can help all of us think of healthy eating in more of a positive light, not something we need to be afraid of.
Yeah, and I think that's so unfortunate because the term diet has been and kind of co-opted by sort of diet culture. When you hear the word diet, you think of restriction and elimination and deprivation and all the things you can't have, when really all a diet is the food that we put into our mouth, and it's different for every single person on the planet. And there's so many different, variations of diets and healthy diets too. So there's no one right diet out there. It's just what diet is best for each person and for each person's family and for each person's economy and for each person's sort of locality in the world. So, I think really when it comes to eating and finding the best way of eating for oneself, certainly there are some sort of benchmarks and some sort of recommendations that can be made around eating. But at the end of the day, your diet has to bring you both health and satisfaction. And if you don't have both of those, you're not going to feel complete as a person. Eating good food is very natural, since the beginning of time. People have been celebrating and feasting with food. It's a way that we recognize the good moments in our life. At the same time, it's a way that we nourish our bodies and, sustain ourselves and provide the energy sources that we need so that we can be well. So I think, diet is very multifaceted and very complex, but at the end of the day, it just kind of comes back to what works for each individual person. And that's what we try to do as health coaches, is really try to hone in on the particulars of what not only diet, but ways of living will help to generate the sort of peak well-being for each person.
Carly, earlier you talked about getting into food originally because it brought people together and it was fun to share a meal with one another. And so right now we're still in the middle, or at some point in the COVID period. And as businesses are closed, especially restaurants, and people have had to stick closer to home, I've noticed an increased interest in cooking. I know that our TV many nights is tuned into some YouTube cooking show. And I'm pretty certain that nearly everyone was working on a sourdough starter at some point. Do you think that the chaotic circumstances that we've been a part of here brought people to seek comfort in food?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think in general, people tend to gravitate towards food in periods of stress. Food is sort of the great neutralizer of emotions. It kind of lights up those reward pathways in the brain and helps us to feel better quickly. And so that can be both, good or bad. But I think, during these times, people have kind of tried to harken back to simpler times in many different ways, not just through more interest in cooking, but, also more interest in being outside and in having, more of a vegetable garden. And a lot of people have been buying chickens. My mom tried to buy chickens and they were like all sold out this year, So in a sense, I think just kind of this like idea of sort of getting back to the basics has been encouraging for people. And so I love that there's an increased interest in cooking these days, and that, we have so many resources at our fingertips now, through the internet, that you can learn about different recipes, and, you can follow people on YouTube, and you can easily start to gain more cooking skills, which is actually really important for maintaining, a healthy way of eating long term.
Carly, that fascinates me in a couple of regards, but one of them is with all the distractions that are out there and all the resources that are at our fingertips, and in the spirit of maybe going back to the basics in certain things, one of the things that you do with your health practice is you introduce meditation practices to your clients and mindfulness practices to your clients. I've got a couple questions sort of revolving around that. I think I know the answer to one of them, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I know that Unity Point here in Des Moines has been very intentional about mindfulness and meditation within some of their health practices. But the question I have is, have you seen an increase in mindfulness and meditation during this COVID sort of crisis that we've been in for the last 6 months?
Well, at least in my world, I do, but I might be biased. I think, in general, mindfulness and meditation practice have become more popularized and are circulating a lot on social media. So in that sense, I do think that it's, trickling out to sort of a wider population. And with good reason, because, these, mindfulness practices are a great antidote to stress, and what is the side effect of stress? It's poor sleep, poor focus, poor concentration, ruminations, running thoughts. And mindfulness and meditation is something you can do for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and it can help with all of that. And it doesn't cost anything, and you don't have to have any special equipment. All you have to do is sit down and close your eyes. And that's all it takes. And so it's as close as we can come to like a fix-it pill that's out there, really. And so if people aren't interested in it, then I think that, it's worth taking a look, because it at first it might take a little getting used to, and maybe you have to learn a technique or two, or, for some people, they like to download an app and do it that way. There's not a right or wrong way to do it. It's just about this idea of taking the time to slow down, to sit down and sort of to become aware of, yourself and your thoughts and your surroundings, and to kind of step outside of the busyness of the day and sort of all of the stress and worry that we have in our day-to-day lives. And I think, people from all faith traditions do this, and so I think that it's very exciting that it's gaining popularity, in our society, and I hope that it will make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, I know personally when I try to slow down and be mindful of what I'm doing, I'm a different person when I do the next thing. And it's really helps me when I take time to slow down. In our industry that I'll just call the financial planning industry, we're limited from a marketing perspective in the use of testimonials. So we can't share testimonials as far as the work that we've done. But what benefits have some of your clients seen, or do you have any testimonials in regards to utilizing meditation and mindfulness that your clients have seen?
Well, I mean, I think, sleep is a great example. I can't tell you how many people struggle with sleep, whether it's falling asleep or whether it's waking up in the middle of the night with racing thoughts, whether it's restless sleep, waking feeling fatigued and groggy. Sleep is really tough for people. And so, what I hear from folks who start a meditation practice before they go to bed is that it helps to create that separation between the busyness of the day and sort of the restful quality of your sleep time, and that's what we really need to do, is that we need to separate daytime from sleep time, right? We need to put away our phones. We need to turn off our screens. We need to dim the lights as the sun goes down, kind of like they did when they didn't have electricity, and like kind of ease into this sleepy time. But I think for many people, they're bringing their phones into their bedrooms. And so the brain doesn't understand that this is my rest time. The sleep hormone melatonin isn't gradually increasing like it should be. Instead, we're just staying in this sort of wired state with the stress hormone cortisol sort of running the show. And so, with meditation, then you can use that as a very intentional and deliberate time to create that moment of separation and to slow the brain down.
Makes perfect sense.
Well, I'm not sure if you can hear the construction that's going on nearby, but it would be impossible to have any mindfulness at the moment. So hopefully that's not filtering through the speakers. But I do have one final question for you, Carly. What's one message or piece of advice you can give us that you think is vital for all of us to hear? Maybe it's something that can encourage us or bring us hope, but what's top of mind for you today?
Yeah, it's such an important question to be asking right now. And I think, given that so many people are in so many different circumstances, one thing that we can all be doing and thinking about is just this question of what is working in my life? What is going well for me right now? Maybe one of your kids who's just like been loving playing the piano, or, maybe you made this amazing lasagna last night, or, maybe you had a really good conversation with your mom on the phone, but it's just taking, and maybe it's during your meditation practice, it's just taking those moments to actually remember that, there are a lot of things going pretty good for me right now. And I'm grateful for that, and the science actually shows that when we practice gratitude and when we recognize all of the good things that are going for us, it lights up different parts of our brain, and it changes our brain chemistry, and it releases the positive hormones that we need to feel good. So it's not just like a woohoo fluffy thing, by thinking about what's actually working well for you, you'll focus more on what's going well in your life and you'll feel better. So that would be my recommendation for people, is as much as life is crazy and hectic and can be really hard, is to just take those moments to notice everything that is going right for you.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I started doing the mental math, and I realized how much of my day is spent thinking about things that aren't going well and that I need to fix, as opposed to appreciating the things that are going well. So that really does resonate with me. And hopefully we can all take something from that. So Carly, thank you for sharing with us today. I hope our listeners are able to take something you said and be inspired towards their own pursuits to improve their lives. I will include information on how to get a hold of Carly if anyone is interested down below in the show notes. So Carly, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Lance and Adam. It's been such a treat.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of my colleague Adam and the whole team at Syverson Strege, thank you for listening to This Story Needs to Be Heard interview series. Everybody be well.
Thank you for listening to This Story Needs to Be Heard. If you know of a story that needs to be heard or would like us to help you in your pursuits, please contact Adam Steen at asteen@onlyworkforyou.com.